Hi everybody, welcome to Bean of the Week. Finally getting back to it, and I wanted to show you my Rancho Gordo bean shipment before I get started in the video. I think it's always fun to show you what they send, and I opened the box already, but you can kind of see what kind of things they'll send, and that way if you ever get into the Rancho Gordo Bean Club membership, then maybe you can see what you might be getting. So, hold on for a second. Getting some notifications. I see some people are coming on. Hi Karen, hi Wendy. So what do they send you if you get a Rancho Gordo Bean Club subscription? Because I do Bean of the Week because I'm a member of the Bean Club. So Rancho Gordo Beans in Napa sends a box every quarter to people who are Bean Club members. And I think right now they have a pretty long waiting list, so if you haven't signed up, sign up. They'll eventually contact you. It might take a few months, but they'll eventually contact you. Hi, Mary. So what they sent this time, they did send the bean I'm using. I posted a picture on this event. It's the Borlotti Veneto bean. So that's already out of the package because I cooked it. But what else did they send? They sent some new kind of black beans, Frijol Negra de Vara. So this is a new black bean. They sent garbanzo beans. They have the best garbanzo beans. Let's see, Kendra's watching from Tennessee. I've never had or made polenta before. I'm excited to see what it is and how to make it. Oh, well, it's easy to make. So garbanzo beans, I love to make the hummus with these garbanzo beans. It makes the best hummus, and it makes just the best chickpeas to eat. They sent some more lentils, black caviar lentils, which are just a small black lentil. They taste really good. They call them caviar lentils because they look like caviar, but they just taste like lentils. They're very good. They sent some Domingo Rojo beans, which are a red bean, a small red bean. I've had these, they're good. They sent some Royal Corona beans, which is a huge white bean, gigantic. They sent some Scarlet Runner beans. So I've had these before. They're a great big, huge red bean. So that's the box. They always wrap everything in their special wrapping paper with Rancho Gordo on it. And what's funny is the thing they do on their group is people wrap their pets up with that paper and make funny posts with pictures of their pets. I know it sounds weird, but I haven't done it yet. So I probably won't, but that's what they do. So let's get down to our recipe today. Along with the beans, Rancho Gordo will send a newsletter every quarter. And in the newsletter, they have recipes. And they'll kind of tell you about the beans and tell you where they grew them, a little bit of history, and they'll give you some different recipes. So the bean I selected today, they only sent half a pound, which is unusual. They usually send a lot more. And they said the reason was the crop didn't produce as much as was expected. The yield wasn't very good. So what they did was they sent half a pound to all the members instead of a pound. And they're going to grow them again. So, but they're a famous bean from Italy. Borlotti Lemon is what they're called, L-A-M-O-N. So they're also called a cranberry bean. So if you couldn't get these Borlotti beans, you can use cranberry beans. And cranberry beans are really common. I see them all the time in the regular grocery store. So what we're going to make today is polenta with Borlotti beans and tomato sauce. And I also included the recipe for polenta, which was also in this recipe packet. So let's first talk about the polenta, and then we'll talk a little bit about the bean recipe. But if you're going to make polenta, what I did today was different. I made this polenta earlier today, so it's a little lumpy because I made it this morning and I let it sit here, and then when I started heating it up, I tried to break it up and it got lumpy. What I should have done is once it kind of solidifies, is just leave it alone and just warm it up when it's like a solid mass. Don't try to stir it up once it's kind of solidified because it won't get smooth. But right after I cooked it, it was nice and smooth and creamy and perfect. But then I let it sit and then it kind of hardens, kind of like grits. But anyway, it turned out fine. It'll taste good. We're going to put beans over it. But what I used for the polenta was I used Bob's Red Mill. And you can use any brand. Actually, you can use any brand of grits because apparently grits and polenta can be used simultaneously usually. So they sell quick polenta, instant polenta. I try not to buy things that are instant because usually they're highly processed. But I noticed on my packet of Bob's Red Mill polenta, it said you could use your Instant Pot. So you could put a cup and 3½ cups of water, 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt if you use salt, in the Instant Pot for 10 minutes and let it naturally release for 15 minutes. Well, that came out perfect. So I tried it. I don't use the Instant Pot that much, but it is a very quick way to make polenta. And polenta is nothing more than a form of corn grits. Really, it's just a meal. So anything called grits and polenta basically is just nothing but corn, okay? It's just corn that's been ground up. And you can make, grits, which is what I make a lot of grits. And so the grits are made the same thing. They call it grits or polenta. So that's what we're using as a base. The other way to make it is to boil some water like you would with grits. Boil up 4 cups of water, whisk in a cup of the polenta, and then let it simmer for about 45 minutes. It takes a while for it to simmer. We don't want to use quick grits and quick things because that usually means they're processed in some way. So we don't want to use stuff that's been processed. Okay, so I've got my skillet. I'm warming it up. I'm going to show you my beans that I've got warming up here too. So the beans, I started cooking them this morning and they're already done. Oops. I'm going to try to turn them down to low heat. So I've had the beans, they cooked this morning, so they're already done. And this was the whole ½ pound. It probably only made 1, 2, not even 4 cups of beans. So the initial recipe was for 5 cups of beans. So I'm gonna kind of make it a smaller amount. But one thing I noticed about these beans was I tried to cook them the same way as Rancho Gordo beans that I usually cook. And I soaked them for not that long. It seemed like a couple hours. And I noticed that they started falling apart when I soaked them. So I wouldn't soak these beans. If you get these Borlotti beans, don't soak them because soaking them made them kind of break apart. I should have just cooked them, with water. But who knew? I didn't know that. So lesson learned on that one. Now cranberry beans, I soak cranberry beans. I usually soak the beans for maybe 5 hours. I wake up at 5, I soak them until about 10, and then I cook them. But those, soaking them made them fall apart. Then I brought them to a boil, reduced them to a simmer. I added some chopped up onions and garlic because we're gonna add a lot of other stuff here now. So what are the ingredients in our recipe for Borlotti beans and tomato sauce? Well, I've got everything sitting out here. And I'm using tomatoes from the garden because my garden is still producing, I think these are San Marzano tomatoes. Those are like Italian tomatoes. I don't have that many of them though. And then I have some, whatever, I don't even remember what kind of tomatoes these are, but they're good. So I'm going to use my homegrown tomatoes instead of tomatoes in a can, but some onion, some garlic, and my friend Julia Buttermore brought me a bunch of garlic. She went to Kentucky, and she has a friend in Kentucky who has a huge garden. And so Julia came back and she brought me all these different bags of garlic, and I kept them in the bags because the bag has the name of the garlic. And the one I'm using today is called Chet Italian. So we'll see. I've been using this particular garlic and I've really enjoyed it. It's really good tasting. So talk about delicious garlic from somebody's garden that hasn't been processed to death. So I'm gonna use that garlic. I'm gonna use a couple cloves of it. It still has a little dirt on it. It's perfect. You know that it's a real homegrown product. So I'm gonna use a couple cloves of garlic. I'm using, Kendra says I'd be in garlic heaven. Oh, I've been enjoying that. Red wine vinegar, you'll need a little bit of that. And then tomato paste. I'm using my Trader Joe's tube. I went out to the garden and I picked some basil and sage, fresh basil and fresh sage. So I'll be using that. This is the basil. So I'm gonna wash it right before I use it, because if you wash fresh herbs and let them sit around, they'll just kind of get really wilted and unattractive looking, so you don't want to do that. I'm trying to find a good spot for this. I'll set it off to the side. So first what we want to do, we want to get some onions in the pan. I'm going to use about a cup of onion because, like I said, I'm not making a huge amount because I don't have enough beans. I used all the beans at Rancho Gordo, not very many. It turns out to be maybe not even 4. Well, there went my onion. It turns out to be not even 4 cups of beans, so that's not very many. So I don't want to overwhelm it with a bunch of onions, so I'm going to use about 1/4 of this giant onion. See a lot of people coming on. Mary, Nancy, Amy, thanks for watching, everybody. I was excited to make some good beans. This is day 1 of the 21-day challenge on my Chef Julia support group. So I just make a couple of horizontal slices, and then I slice down the top of the onion along the lines. That will give me, little 1/4 inch pieces. Remember, I'm only using 1/4. I'm gonna hurry up and get this in the pan. So we do the 21-day challenge every 21 days. And that's for people who want to eat the daily dozen, which is lots of beans, grains, berries, greens, fruits and vegetables, other vegetables. It's very simple, but it's also not simple because and I'm going to cut the ends off the garlic, both pieces of garlic. There's a hard end, there's a kind of a point, and then there's a hard end. If you cut the hard end off and then you smash your garlic with a knife, the peel comes right off, so you don't have to deal with the garlic peel. It just comes right off. So the 21-day challenge is to eat those food groups in the daily dozen every day for 21 days and see how you feel, see if you lose weight, the whole thing. And I've been doing the daily dozen 21-day challenges since May of last year. And so that's basically all I ever eat is, just basically your grains, beans, greens, vegetables, and fruit, and no oil. So it's also, a no oil way of eating. Just where you can see it. So I've got my skillet with the garlic. It's getting kind of hot. Hot skillet, medium-high heat. And then we don't have to add anything to it unless it starts browning too much and sticking, and it's starting to get a little brown. So I don't want it to get too brown. So I've got some water to add. I'll add some water, about a tablespoon. But don't add water too soon, because if you add water to a cold pan to saute your stuff, it'll just steam it and it won't have any flavor. It won't taste good. Okay, so about 3 minutes on the onions. I'm going to cover the pan. That cooks them faster. I just, cover the skillet. And then I'm going to start cutting up my tomatoes. So like I said before, if you wanted to use canned tomatoes, you could. But I hate to not use my garden tomatoes, especially the San Marzano tomatoes, because those are kind of like Italian tomatoes. And my past experience with this is anything made with homegrown tomatoes tastes outstanding. And since we're not making a bunch of this recipe, I'm going to try to use about a little bit over a cup of tomatoes. Now, I've already cooked my Borlotti beans, And what's funny, like I said earlier, soaking them made them almost fall apart. Some of them were falling apart, but cooking them only took an hour. So these were the fastest cooking beans I have ever seen. I just glanced over there. Usually the beans take a couple of hours. And I glanced over there to check on them, and they were already like falling apart. So when I look at these beans, I can see that they're so tender. They're like falling apart tender. They're a little too tender, but they taste really good. They're some of the best beans I've ever tasted. I sampled them several times, and I was like, and they made the most outstanding bean broth. So I'm going to incorporate the bean broth that was in the beans instead of using vegetable stock, because my recipe says to use water or vegetable stock, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use the bean broth because there is no way I can duplicate any flavor that tastes as good as the bean broth that comes with this. So, you know, that's how I see other people's recipes that they call for canned tomatoes and vegetable broth or water. I'm saying, no, I'm going to use the delicious bean broth that was developed when I cooked the beans, and I'm going to use my own homegrown tomatoes instead of a can of tomatoes, because how could a canned tomato be better than something that you picked out of the garden? I went out to the garden literally a few minutes ago and came back with this big bowl of tomatoes and thought, I'm going to use these today. And I also got some peppers while I was out there. I have a lot of different hot peppers, hot chili peppers. I'm not going to use them today, but just for an example. Hi, Pam Milnowski, Beverly. Just for an example, if you wanted to spice it up a little bit, you know, people in my part of the country, Texas, we're always adding hot chili peppers to stuff. It's okay. Even if the recipe doesn't call for it, it doesn't matter. If you like chili peppers in your food, add the chili peppers. I put hot sauce on stuff too, that the recipe didn't call for hot sauce. My mother she loved Tabasco sauce, and she wanted to put Tabasco sauce on everything. She put it on her eggs. She put it on all her American food. She was Japanese, but she would put it on all her American food, and it used to drive my father crazy. Like if we went to a restaurant and she would, sit down and get her food, and then she would say to the server, excuse me, do you have any Tabasco sauce? And my father would hate that. I don't know why he didn't want her. He just didn't want her to ask for Tabasco sauce. So then when I got a little older, I found these little tiny bottles of Tabasco sauce, like at a gift shop, tourist place. And I bought her the little gift-size Tabasco sauce. And she just thought that was the best thing ever. So I'm going to put the tomatoes in with the onions. All right, so it was stirring the tomatoes in vinegar. This looks so pretty, you guys. It's beautiful color of tomatoes. You can't beat fresh tomatoes, but if all you have is canned, it works. Just use what you have. Okay, I'm going to put in a splash of this red wine vinegar. Not even a tablespoon, like half a tablespoon, because I don't want to overpower it with red wine vinegar. Okay, so it's just your common everyday red wine vinegar. Someone said, what are you using to chop your vegetables? What type of, can't read the thing, knife. Oh, what kind of knife? My knife is a Miyabi chef's knife, and it's on my Amazon store. It's listed under cooking tools, so you can get that. It's you can't miss it. It's M-Y-A-B-I, Miyabi, and it is the best, sharpest, most wonderful knife. I use it all the time. So if you need a good knife, I highly recommend you go there to the Amazon store. I am an Amazon associate, so they do give me some kind of a little amount of money if somebody buys something through my store. It's not very much, trust me. You could shop for a lot of stuff on Amazon, and the amount of money I would get is minuscule. So, but I appreciate it if you do. I pretty much put stuff on the Amazon store out of convenience for people who follow my stuff, because then you can find what I use really easily. So, you know, that knife, and I got my son one of these knives for his birthday yesterday, and he was so excited. He thought that was wonderful. He was just beside himself. Okay, so then I'm going to add my tomato paste. I kind of like a tablespoon. I kind of like this Trader Joe's tomato paste. I just eyeballed it because I kind of know what a tablespoon looks like, because then you don't have to open the whole can when you need tomato paste. And I do have, like when I do have to open a can of tomato paste and I don't use it all, the handy thing that I do with it, and I'm gonna put some of my bean broth in here and cover it with the lid, okay? Because it says to add the bean broth, add the vegetable stock, which I'm not adding. So I'm taking some bean broth out of my pot of beans and try to get the broth without the beans, which is not easy, because the beans want to come out with it. I probably need both hands for this job, so I can kind of tilt this a little bit. All right. And if a few beans get in there, it's all right. It's not going to harm anything. Okay, so I got quite a bit of bean broth in there. Okay, I see Ellen's on. Mary Myers, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Okay, so I need to cook this for just a few minutes, and while I'm doing that, we'll talk a little bit more about the bean recipe. I'm going to get a couple more spoonfuls of broth. So it called for, oops, try not to get it on the stove. I'm trying to get about a cup of my bean broth in here. In the original recipe, they said to use a cup of vegetable broth or water. But like I said, I don't want to use something if I have something better. So I'm going to put that in there. There's no other seasonings. And I did put a little salt in my beans, so the beans do have some flavor. They're not just bland. And I'm going to cover this up because I want to break down the tomatoes so they cook a little bit. So I add the onions and the tomatoes, add the broth to the onions and tomatoes and the tomato paste, add the basil and sage, season with salt and pepper, and simmer for 15 to 20 minutes. So let me get my sage and basil. So like I said, I got these out of the garden, and the sage leaves are pretty big, so I'm going to use the smaller ones. Let's see, what a great tip about the bean broth. I never would have thought of it. Okay, Kendra. Yeah, well, a lot of times, like in this recipe, it says 4 to 5 cups of drained Rancho Gordo beans or cranberry beans, Borlotti or cranberry beans. So normally you drain the beans and you discard the broth. But then, and some bean broth doesn't taste that great. Some of it is kind of too thick, too dark, not a good flavor. And so then you're thinking, oh, I don't want to use that. And then you don't want to use it, or like canned bean broth doesn't taste good. So what I did was I tasted the bean broth when I was tasting the beans, and it was so good that I said, oh, I'm going to use that. But I don't always do that, so always taste the bean broth before you decide that you like it, because you know, you may decide that it's not going to go well with your food. I see Phil Cognian was watching. Phil has been to Italy, so he's probably eaten things like this in Italy. These kind of beans, some of these Borlotti beans and different Italian beans, we don't really get them here, or they're hard to get here. I'm going to use about 6 basil leaves, and this is basil, like I said, it's from my garden, so I know it's very potent. So I don't want to overdo the basil, because you know, too much of a good thing is just too much. And I'm probably not the biggest basil fan in the world. I like it, but You know, a little goes a long way. Some people are much bigger fans of basil than I am. So I put about 6 basil leaves in here. And see if you can see this, let's see, Phil said konnichiwa. Oh, he's talking to me in Japanese. Konnichiwa. Okay, so the basil's in here. And if you can see this, it's starting to, just in that little bit, the fresh tomatoes are breaking down in this bean broth. So it's creating this really nice look. And then I've got my sage. I'm only going to put about 2 sage leaves in here because, again, sage is another thing that's really, really strong. And I don't really want to have too much fresh herb, strong tasting sage for my taste. Now, some people don't mind it, and you know, if you're a person that likes a lot of fresh herbiness in your food, you could add more, but always start with less, because what if you put, you know, a whole handful of sage leaves in your food, and then you decided that Phil says he's made Borlotti bean soup. I bet that's good. I'm a real fan of this Borlotti beans. I'm going to start looking around to see if I can find some. Maybe somewhere besides Rancho Gordo. They're not the only place in town that sells beans, right? Okay, so I got my sage and basil in here. Oh, that smells great. And now I'm going to put the cover back on and let it cook a little bit longer. We can't, we're not going to cook this for 20 minutes, obviously. It would just be too long. So it's going to be a little bit less time, but you know, 15 or 20 minutes, it'll do this, but it looks like it's working faster than it said it would. So what we're going to do next is I've got the pot of beans, and I did not drain my beans because remember I said I like the bean broth, and there's not that much of it because I took out quite a bit when I was making this tomato mixture. So I'm going to take a sip of my tea while I'm waiting. This is unsweetened green tea. It's very good. It's from the Japanese. Well, they sell it at Costco now, but I used to get it at the Japanese store. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this tomato mixture, put my beans over here, and I'm going to take the tomato mixture and just add it to my beans. And if you had more beans, of course, you could double the ingredients that we were using. But like I said, you know, this little half-a-pound bag wasn't even half-a-pound bag. It did not make a ton of beans. It only made, I think, about not even 4 cups. So there's that. And then we can put in our, where's my pepper? Hold on. Well, mysteriously, my pepper grinder has disappeared, but you know, you can put black pepper, you can put salt if you like freshly ground sea salt. You know, feel free to add extras like salt and pepper. That drives me crazy when something is missing like that. It's probably in the other room. Okay, so the only other thing that I would add would be if I wanted to add some salt and pepper. So then we can serve it. What we're gonna do is we take our cooked polenta, and if you just join me, what I did for the polenta was I cooked it in the Instant Pot. Right up here. And I don't always use the Instant Pot for stuff like polenta. I've never really even used the Instant Pot for grits before, so that was a little bit different. But the recipe on the Bob's Red Mill grits said to try it in the Instant Pot. So I said, okay, I'll try it. And they surprisingly came out really well. They came out nice and fluffy, and you know, nothing wrong with them at all. So we're gonna take a serving of our polenta. Now I will say that they were better and fluffy right after they were done, because as they sit around they tend to solidify. So if you like them creamier, then use them when they're first done, because the longer they sit around, the more they tend to kind of form, you know, more like a cake. And they're fine. Then you can warm them up, you know, in a solid form in your air fryer or on the stove top or wherever. But if you like them soft and fluffy, as soon as they're done cooking, then serve them. I let them sit. They've been sitting around here since this morning. So, you know, they kind of, you know, hardened a little bit, and that's fine. They still look good. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to take our beans, and we don't really have to cook this. We could cook this for a few more minutes, but you know, the beans were already hot. They've been sitting here. So when you make this, cook it for a few more minutes, but you know, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and serve it. So what I'm doing is I'm serving this delicious Borlotti bean and tomato, garlic, onion, good smelling thing on top of the polenta. And then I can take some of my fresh basil, you know, put some on top, cut it up. And then this is going to be my dinner. I'm not going to eat this now, but I'll warm it up later. And then what we have here is we have this creamy, wonderful polenta, which is like corn grits, with a sauce that's made from, you know, wonderful Borlotti beans and basil and sage and fresh garden tomatoes. Wow, that's really good. And that fresh garlic that my friend Julia Buttermore got me from her friend in Kentucky, that added a nice, you know, really delicious garlic flavor. If you like it soupier, you know, get some more of your bean broth and put it in here. But this is truly comfort food. This soft, creamy beans that have so much flavor with fresh homegrown vegetables, or, you know, canned tomatoes will work too. But it's hard to find something better to me than something made with fresh pot of beans. And so as part of my, let's see, will you post the recipe please, Beverly Moore? Yes, of course. As soon as I get done, I'll go into my office and quickly post the recipe. But one of the ways that we stick with the 21-day challenge and eating the daily dozen and eating the whole food plant-based no oil way of eating is to have good food around. And having, you know, grains and beans around all the time is very helpful, because you always have something to eat. So I always make a pot of beans. And one of the reasons I started doing the bean of the week every Monday was I thought that was a really good way to start the week, by having a fresh pot of some kind of beans, and then use those beans throughout the week to make other recipes, such as, you know, something like this the first day, which is pure bean stew with fresh polenta. But then I could have these beans in soup form if I wanted to. I could add some vegetable broth and some other vegetables and maybe put some pasta in there and have like a bean soup tomorrow. I could take this and just, you know, put it over some brown rice or potatoes, you know, bake a potato. A lot of times I'll have a baked potato and then put a cup of cooked beans on top of the potato. Or I'm trying to think of other ways I've eaten beans. Any grain, couscous or barley or millet or farro. You know, there are so many grains now. If you go to the grocery store, quinoa, and go to the grain aisle and just decide that you're going to pick, you know, 5 different grains to make. Let's see, somebody had a question. Lisa Pullum. Hi, Lisa. So, you know, there's so many grains that you can get and make stuff, you know, just make a different grain to eat with your beans. So then you end up with beans and grains, and then have a little side salad to eat with your delicious, so good, with your delicious beans. And if you wanted to have more basil and more sage, add that. To me, it's just the right amount. Another thing we could put in here is red chili pepper. I like to spice things up, so I have like dried red chili flakes. I could see myself adding that. Another really nice addition to this, if you could find it, is Calabrian red chilies if you can find them in a jar that they're not packed in oil. A lot of times they're packed in oil, but if you can find them not packed in oil, Calabrian red chili peppers would be really good on this. So there you go. This was the bean of the week, the Borlotti beans with polenta and a tomato sauce. And I hope you liked this. I certainly did, and I really enjoyed. I discovered that I really liked making polenta in the Instant Pot. So I know those of you who are always rushing around and working and not cooking from home, not cooking at home that much, or always looking for ways to save time. Well, the Instant Pot polenta is a really good thing to have. And you can have polenta for breakfast too. You could have it like grits, like a breakfast cereal, put a little almond milk and maple syrup on it and make it sweet, or like I like to have it savory and have it with tofu scramble. So that makes a good breakfast. And I released my Breakfast Favorites ebook the other day, and there's several recipes in there for grits, different forms of grits, which is the same thing as polenta. And so I had like a creamy bowl of grits, a savory grits, hatch chili grits, grits with tofu scramble. So if you like breakfast foods, that ebook has 60 recipes in it. I think it's got more recipes than any ebook I've done. So I really put a lot of effort and time into testing those recipes and getting them in the ebook. I will put the link to the ebook on the comments here in case you want to take a look at it. If you click on the link, it will take you to the page that shows the cover and the table of contents, so you could see what the recipes are before you decide you want it. So anyway, enjoy making the beans, and I will be back on here Friday for the Friday recap, because this is week 1 of the 21-day challenge. So if you're new to the 21-day challenge, be sure and watch Friday. Rosemary said, I used your ebook for my tofu scramble yesterday and today. Wonderful. Tofu scramble. I love that. And it looked good. I saw your picture, Rosemary. You had tofu scramble and a really beautiful looking smoothie right next to it. And I was looking at that going, I wish I had that for breakfast instead of my piece of, it was like a berry and walnut cake, which was really good, but I like savory breakfast too. So great. She made the tofu scramble. Somebody had posted on I can't remember, one of these groups, that they brought tofu scramble to lunch at work, and they were sitting there, and they said something about how much they loved their tofu scrambled eggs, and then the person that they were sitting with at lunch made like the gagging motion with the finger in their throat. Let's see, somebody, Harshdeep sent 50 stars. Thank you, Harshdeep Swami. I think that's how he says his name. He's going to be on Chef AJ, I think on Wednesday. Put that in the comments for us. He lives in India, and he cooks a lot of Indian food, obviously. That's really good. I learned a lot from watching his YouTube videos back when I was working on my own Indian food class, but he's very delightful, and he's going to be on Chef AJ. I recommended him. I think other people did too, but I wrote her a personal email and said, please invite Harshdeep Swami to be on your show. And he's going to be on it. So the power of networking. So anyway, watch him. I think it's pretty sure it's Wednesday, September the 1st, but put in the comments what day it is. And somebody sent, and he sent 99 stars. If you send stars, Facebook pays a penny per star. So it's a way to reward people who are going live on Facebook. I think they want us to do this. So if you're inclined, buy some stars, but please don't feel pressured to do that. It's not a big deal if you don't. And please make this dish. This was the outrageously delicious Italian Borlotti beans with tomato sauce over polenta. And I can't wait to eat my dinner tonight because I know it's going to be really good. But first, before I have dinner, I have to go to the gym and do an hour of weight training with my trainer. I do that every Monday, usually Monday and Wednesday. And he does not have air conditioning. So his gym is so hot, it is unbelievably hot in there, that I bring like these cloths that are in ice water. They're like a special kind of cloth you wear to, you know, cool you down. So the cloth, I put it in ice water, and then I carry a spray bottle of ice water to spray myself, drink plenty of water, and I still feel like I'm gonna fall over when I'm in there training because it's so hot. It's Texas, and the temperature here is 91 degrees today, so it's not as hot as it can be, but that is really hot. Hi, Sandy Tilt. Nice to see your name pop up. Sandy's come here for an in-person class in the past. We had a good time. Maybe one day I'll be doing in-person classes again. You never know. Okay, everybody, Bean of the Week. Thank you for watching. I don't know what I'm gonna make next week, but like I showed you earlier, you know, I have a whole new box of beans to choose from, from Rancho Gordo. So I just have, it's always hard to decide which ones to make because there's so many of them. And I have so many good recipes and so many good ideas and garden vegetables and all these things I could be using to make food. So it's always hard. Oh, and let me, while you're here, Taro is always on camera. Taro, he's doing very well. I know some of you are always asking me about Taro. Hey, buddy, wake up. He's taking a nap, as usual. He's got a shirt on. See his little striped shirt? The reason he has a shirt on is because his radiation treatments have resulted in his skin kind of tearing down where the radiation is. And so it's kind of raw looking, so we have to keep a shirt on him so that he won't scratch it, because it's like on his side and he'll just like scratch it with his back legs and then it could get infected and everything. So, but it's healing up pretty well. He's responding to his treatment, so thank you for your prayers. And I appreciate everybody watching and following what I do. So hi, Michelle, have a great day. Hi, Amy. Thank you all, and please make the Bean of the Week and put pictures of what you make. I'll really appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.